Happy Thanksgiving. I want to start this by saying today, hopefully you can enjoy a lot of time with your family and friends, eating a lot of food, of course, and watching football. Today, I also want to thank you guys for the channel's success. As a little over a year ago, I started this channel just out of the bloom, and now we're on the road to 5,000 subscribers. So I'd say that's pretty good success over just 1 year of time. So thank you guys for all the support on the channel. And again, hopefully you have an amazing time later today with all your friends and family. But another guy I want to thank is my co-host, Amir Stewart. You're here today. You've been on the podcast for, at this point, like 2 months straight. Each and every Thursday, we've been coming to you guys and bringing you our weekly predictions. And recently, we've been adding a little twist to it. But Amir, before we get into these contenders and pretenders going into week 12 of the NFL season, how you doing on this Thanksgiving morning?
I'm doing great. There's no better way to spend my Thanksgiving break talking football, watching football, and back on the pod. So let's go.
Absolutely. No, and we're not going to waste any time, though. Let's get into it. Thanksgiving edition. And we're going to start here in the AFC North. Now, let me clarify some things for you guys at home. If you see a team with a star in the box, you see the Ravens, Steelers, and Browns have a star in their box. So what we did was we took the top 16 teams in the NFL record-wise, and we threw them on a slide, and we said, are these teams contenders or pretenders, right? And then for the remaining 16 teams, the bottom 16, we knew they weren't contenders, right? We knew they had no chance of really making the playoffs, let alone being a Super Bowl favorite. So for those teams, like you see here with the Bengals, they're going to be in blue boxes. And we're basically saying, has their season been successful? And we took into account their situation, what their preseason expectations were, at least in our eyes, injuries, firings, all that stuff. So we took it into account and we said, has this been a successful season? Is the basic gist. But let's start here. We both have the Ravens as Super Bowl contenders. We'll come back to them in a minute. The Steelers and the Browns as pretenders. The Browns are on a 3-game win streak. They have maybe the best defense in football. The Steelers, they might have turned the page in their chapter as they now have a new offensive coordinator. And then the Bengals, of course, due to injuries, they were not a top 16 team. And of course, if you tuned in the last Thursday's video before Burrow got hurt, I said they were still my Super Bowl favorites. Of course, not now. And given all the injuries they've had, it hasn't been a successful season. But Amir, if you want to pick a team or two on the slide, and we'll dive into them.
All right, so I'll go ahead and talk about Baltimore first. This is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, the defense is elite. The offense is grooving. Lamar's looking pretty well this season. He's not looking great throwing the ball, but at the same time, his receiving core is lackluster. But I chose contenders because the pass game is starting to finally get in the groove. The run game is always going to be great. But as this next week come, it might shift. Because historically, Lamar statistically has not been good without Mark Andrews in the lineup. So
right.
I'm interested in seeing that. And for the Bengals, I said no. That's for the simple fact that even when Burrow was healthy, they were 500, which is unacceptable for that team and how talented they are. And so they are not contenders or, not having a successful season, in my opinion.
Now, do you think the Steelers, we know that they have a good defense. Do you think maybe their season can turn around with the new offensive coordinator? Or do you think they're kind of just going to be a classic Mike Tomlin team where they win 9, maybe 10 games and fall short of the playoffs?
There'll be a classic Mike Tomlin team. In today's league, you need a quarterback to get you over the hump. And that's what they're lacking. Kenny Pickett is not the guy. He's actually not even starting this week. I forgot who was starting this week, but he's not the guy. He's holding us off. Shoot, man.
I cut you off there. I'm sorry for.
The Steelers should have picked up Joe Flacco before the Browns did. The Steelers need some sort of change.
Right. But I guess I'll tag in here for the Ravens. The last thing I just want to mention was this is a team that legitimately can be 10-1 at this point in the season if they could just finish games. If they could finish the Browns off up 2 scores 2 weeks ago, that's a win. And then if they could beat the Steelers, which they were up, 17-3 in the fourth quarter against a team that doesn't have an offense in the Pittsburgh Steelers, this team could very well be 10-1. But like you mentioned there, it's going to be very interesting to see going forward how this team operates without Mark Andrews. But I think this team is just different this year given the scheme change. But as of right now, we both have them as Super Bowl contenders. Moving over to the NFC North, of course, you see the red and blue backgrounds. Hopefully you can pick up. That's the difference between AFC and NFC. But we have the Lions as contenders. I'm surprised that you actually gave it to the Lions as contenders. We have the Vikings as pretenders. And then the Bears and the Packers, we both said it wasn't a very successful season, at least to this point in the year. But again, same thing. If you want to pick a team and dive into them.
So I'll talk about the Packers and the Bears, and obviously these teams weren't expected to do much, but the one thing you did expect is for both quarterbacks, Jordan Love and Justin Fields, to show some promise and to show some growth, to show some sort of ability to kind of lead this team to at least a decent record,
Right.
and both these quarterbacks have struggled. And especially Justin Fields, he's probably been the most disappointing quarterback, one of the most disappointing quarterbacks in the league so far this year. They go out, they try to surround him with all these weapons. They come in with a lot of hype this year, saying, "Oh, we're going to go to the playoffs, turn everything around." They're in the same exact spot as last year.
Yeah, I mean, this Bears team, like you said, last year they ended on a high. And when the trade, when the draft came around, not the trade deadline, when the draft came around, they had the number 1 overall pick. They could have used that on a CJ Stroud, on a Bryce Young. And I know Bryce Young hasn't looked the greatest, but who knows? Something as small as a change of scenery, and those quarterbacks could have looked completely different. But they believed in Justin Fields, and he hasn't been that so far. As again, he's showing his rushing upside, but the passing improvement that we wanted to see hasn't been there quite yet. But for Jordan Love, I did say it wasn't a successful season, even though I didn't expect them. I actually had the Packers as a 5-win team coming into the year. However, I think, for Jordan Love, I'm going to cut him a little bit of slack, because Brett Favre in his first season with the Packers as a starter, he was 9-7. Aaron Rodgers' first season as a starter. Do you want to take a guess how many wins Aaron Rodgers had in his first season as a starter?
Sure. What do you have, like 11?
No, he had 6. He was 6-10 for the Green Bay Packers. Now, I'm not comparing.
Well, he's not Aaron Rodgers.
Again, I don't know if he's going to be Aaron Rodgers. That's a very tall task to live up to. But I guess let's cut him a little bit of slack. But definitely, he hasn't bounced back after those first couple great weeks. But for the Lions, again, top 10 offense, top 10 defense. Dan Campbell has those guys playing elite. And then, the Vikings, they've had their fair share of injuries. They're just kind of waiting for Justin Jefferson to return. But after Kirk Cousins went down, I guess their Super Bowl contention status kind of went out the window. And then in the AFC South, we have the Jaguars and the Houston Texans, 2 teams that got big wins the last week. And Houston maybe is, the hottest team in football. We both have them as pretenders. Do you want to dive into maybe why Houston and Jacksonville are pretenders in your mind, at least for the remainder of the season?
Yes, I'll talk about Jacksonville. Jacksonville is a team that hasn't had, a very convincing win yet. You could argue against Buffalo, earlier this year, but at the same time, Buffalo's even been struggling. And they've gotten dominated by great teams. The Niners absolutely blew them out. Earlier this year, the Texans blew them out the water. And they made it tough on the Chiefs, but the Chiefs controlled that whole entire game and neutralized their offense.
Right.
All the other games they've won, they have been dragging it out, barely even squeezing through. They barely squeezed through New Orleans, barely squeezed through Pittsburgh. And this team isn't showing much promise. And the Texans, the Texans are kind of weird. They're getting better week by week. And as of right now, they're still pretenders. I feel like we still haven't seen enough for us to put them in that contenders category, because that contenders category has to be very specific. It's only, about 4 to 5 teams that's truly contenders.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was my mindset coming into it, was there's only really 4 or 5 teams I wanted to say that were contenders, at least at this point in the season, because I'm always of the assumption that you can't have 10 different teams that are contenders this far into any season. So to me, though, like you mentioned, they're very weird, but they're America's favorite team at the moment, because everybody wants to see CJ Stroud continue this rookie dominance. And this team as a whole has just been fun, led by Tank Dell and CJ Stroud and Nico Collins when he's available. And of course, a lot of credit goes to D'Amico Ryans. So, often we don't see a rookie coach have this much success with this young of a team. Jacksonville coming into the season, I had them as a top 5 Super Bowl contender. And again, they're 7-3. They've had a 5-game win streak this season. I just don't see it. Last week, of course, maybe was their best week of the year. I just don't know if they can beat those top teams like you mentioned, because they're a team like the Dolphins, which we'll talk about in a moment. They beat the bad teams and they beat the mediocre teams, but they just can't beat those great teams. And in order to be a contender, you need to do that. And then for the Colts here, we both said, despite being 5-5 mediocre and losing Anthony Richardson, it's a successful season. And I'll start this one here as Anthony Richardson, to me, of course, go Gators, one of the most talented college quarterbacks I've ever seen. But I didn't think he was ready for the pros. And I said that all throughout the offseason. I said they need to let Gardner Minshew start, or whoever the quarterback was going to be. Give AR-15, give him 5 to 10 games, and then throw him into the fire second half of the season. So at the very worst, you can still have a good pick to build around him. Give him a Marvin Harrison Jr. or whoever the case would have been. But I think Anthony Richardson showed he was ready, at least the little glimpses that we got, and he was super talented. But given the fact that since he's been out, this team is still winning ball games due to Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss. And I think that's also the biggest reason I say it was a successful year, is they figured out the Jonathan Taylor situation. But Amir, your quick thoughts on the Indianapolis Colts season so far?
So for the Colts, man, at the end of the day, I mean, they got better. So, it's a successful season, without having your quarterback that you wanted to start right away and you wanted to develop right away. I mean, you put Minshew in there, and this team has somehow been able to win games. You see flashes of their offense, having high score games, somehow getting these wins. And shoot, right now, I didn't expect them to have 5 wins, 10 games into the season. And, the Colts are honestly probably shocking everybody right now, and they're only about a game or two out of the playoff contention. So that's why I say yes.
I think they are the first team out of the playoff mix right now in the AFC. So again, shout out to I guess Frank Reich, coach over there, and of course shout out to Gardner and the crew for I guess playing at the level they are. Still scratching my head though about the Shaq Leonard situation. I wonder if he requested his release or if it was just a team decision. Regardless, the Tennessee Titans are the first team that we split on as far as has it been a successful season or has it not been. I believe you said no, and I'll give you my quick rationale on why I say it has been a successful season. To me, of course, they drafted Will Levis. Nobody had expectations for him coming into the year, and we all kind of said that he might be okay, he might be Ryan Tannehill at his best, but he's never going to be this franchise cornerstone of a quarterback. And I'm not saying he is right now. I don't think Will Levis is their guy going forward. At least not yet. However, I came into the season and I predicted them to win 4 games for the entire season. And a lot of people called me crazy, but I just didn't believe in this Tennessee Titans team. And to me, they're in a position where I wanted them to be, and that's to have a higher draft pick to either go after a quarterback or go after an elite playmaker offensively or defensively to get, go into the next phase or chapter of this Titans team. So to me, it's a relatively successful season, given the fact that the record-wise, they're where I think they should have been. And that Will Levis, I mean, that's even a bonus that he's shown promise.
Well, for me, I said no. And, I might have a different outlook on, the term success. Like for me, success is winning at the end of the day. And the Titans got way worse from last year. You still got Tannehill back, and Tannehill played completely terrible to start the year off. I mean, I think he threw 2 touchdowns and 6 picks. It got so bad, and Levis had to start. Yeah. And I mean, it practically had the same exact offense back from last year. And I mean, they looked completely horrible, like a completely different team. And that's why I said it hasn't been successful.
Yeah, I will say it's the part of not being successful to me was trading Kevin Byard for really nothing. And then you're probably going to trade Derrick Henry this offseason for probably nothing. So you were going to be, it might just be a tough couple of years in Tennessee until you find that guy or those group of guys. But for me, just for the simple fact that this is where I wanted them to be. I said it was a successful season to this point. In the NFC South, we have the Saints as the only team as a top 16 team. We said they were pretenders. I don't know if there's too much to dive into with the Saints, as Derek Carr, he might not play this week, given that the fact that he's still in concussion protocol. If not, Jameis Winston's going to play another week. I'm not sure how excited we are to see that. He is a gunslinger at the end of the day, but Chris Olave's been okay. Alvin Kamara has had a bit of a resurgence, and their defense has been good. It's just their offense that's been lacking. I'll let you dive into the Saints if you would like to. But for the remaining 3 teams, Baker and the Bucks, the Falcons, they've just been okay. They have some questionable coaches there in each organization. And to me, fire Arthur Smith is the last thing I'm going to say about this slide. The Panthers are where they should be. Maybe, hopefully they should have won more games given the fact they traded their number 1 pick. But, they got their guy in Bryce Young, and rookie quarterbacks need time. But any team on this list you want to talk about here?
I'll talk about the Saints. Despite them having the greatest quarterback in Saints history, Jameis Winston, you
Oh,
know, this
okay.
this team is completely pretenders. The defense is obviously always going to be good, but they haven't figured anything out offensively. It's just inconsistent from Olave and Michael Thomas week to week. They're just average. So
Yeah.
that's why I said pretenders.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna. I would hope that you were just joking because I have this Drew Brees signed football behind me as well as a pop, and I don't even collect toys like that. And Drew Brees is my goat, so we will not stand for, of course, that disrespect. In the AFC East, however, this is a very interesting division. We have, of course, the Dolphins and the Bills, two of the top teams in the league record-wise. We both have them as pretenders, though. And do you want to dive into either or of those teams or both? However you want to do it. But let me know why one of these two powerhouses, at least offensively, are not a contender at this point in the season.
Well, shoot, the Dolphins, they've been completely neutralized by great teams. They haven't won a big game. I think they haven't won beat a team above 500 in over a year. So, we're kind of waiting on the Dolphins to show that, they can show up in big games.
Yeah.
And, we've seen it, this year, they got completely dominated by the Eagles. The Chiefs neutralized their offense, which shouldn't have happened.
The Bills.
Right. The Bills earlier this year blew them out as well. And the Bills, man, the Bills cannot take care of the football offensively, man. Fumbles, Josh Allen throwing interceptions, and their defense right now I guarantee every starter on that defense is probably upset right now. Upset with Josh Allen, upset with the offensive coaching staff. The fact that their offense isn't holding the weight. They're supposed to be the face of that team, supposed to be leading that team, and the Bills right now should be first or second in the AFC, and there's no reason why they should be 6-5.
Yeah, I mean, at this, I'm gonna pat myself on the back yet again because coming into the year, I had this team as like a 9 or 10 win team, and I said that hey, this is a team that is going to run into some troubles this year as far as team morale, and that they might have to blow it up after this season, and not blow it up as far as get rid of Josh Allen, but trading Stephon Diggs, maybe trading some veterans on the defensive side of the ball to kind of revamp this team and maybe even get rid of Sean McDermott if this trend continues. But you talked about the Bills there, and the Dolphins as well. Both these teams just struggle to win those big time games. And to me, there's just a difference between a good playoff team and a Super Bowl contender, obviously. It's like the difference between the Cavs and the Denver Nuggets, right? In the NBA side of things. I think out of these two teams, I think we both have more, I guess, confidence in the Dolphins because of their high-powered offense and because of the fact that Tyreek Hill is Tyreek Hill and he can win you a week. Not to mention Jalen Ramsey looks like he's back in his prime. I think we both have more confidence in those teams there. But then for the Jets, we split on this one. I'm pretty sure you said it was not a successful season, but I'll dive into why I said it was. And let's
I said it was.
Okay, it was a successful. That's
Yeah.
where we split there. So let me know why you believe it was a successful season, because to me, when you get Aaron Rodgers, you're a Super Bowl contender, or you should be, and they just haven't been that. Of course, injuries happened, but it's the aftermath of what happened with Aaron Rodgers, with the Zach Wilson chapter that they've been going through and all the team drama. So to me, it wasn't a successful season. A lot of that due, though, to Aaron Rodgers' injury. But why do you have them as a successful season?
Yeah, well, injuries is something that, I wouldn't put into the equation just for the simple fact that you can't control them.
Right.
And, usually, I would measure a team's success, with their guy up until that point. Aaron Rodgers gets hurt the first drive of the season. And so, I measure it after that. How did they respond to that injury? And they honestly won 4 games that they shouldn't have won. They should not have beaten the Bills week 1. They somehow found a way to win that game. They ended up beating the Broncos a few weeks later.
The
And
Eagles?
right, and the Eagles as well. And so, that's why I'm kind of saying it's a successful season, because now they're in a spot where it's like, if Aaron Rodgers was to magically rush back from an injury, they'd still be in playoff contention and still have somewhat of a shot.
Yeah, it's definitely respectable. It's just to me, I think it's been very ugly in New York since Aaron Rodgers went down. And like you said, they got a couple big wins in the season. But as of right now, the last couple of weeks, there's a bad vibe around the organization, at least in my opinion. And now I think you put these young players in a position where it's like they're in a big market, but they're not winning games. So if Aaron Rodgers doesn't come back this year and he comes back next year, most likely in his retirement year, it puts a lot of pressure on this organization to win. And if they don't win, maybe Garrett Wilson wants out. Maybe Sauce Gardner wants to go to another winning team. I'm just saying crazier things have happened, and it's these unsuccessful seasons where teams have this hype and then they fall short, whatever the cases may be, that can ultimately stop a dynasty. That's the word I'm looking for. It could stop a dynasty before it even starts. One player after another could want out of the franchise, if that makes any sense. I know I kind of went all over the place there. But for the Patriots, we both said it was not a successful season. And I think, not a lot to say here. They extended Bill Belichick. They signed Ezekiel Elliott, and they traded J.C. Jackson, or they traded for J.C. Jackson. I guess that's the biggest summary here, but they don't have a quarterback, and there's no confidence in the team or around the team or in the coaching staff. But anything else to add here about the New England Patriots?
I mean, the Patriots have been disappointing, I mean, you honestly expect better out of any team that's led by Bill Belichick. And, they've been just disappointing overall. I mean, I think what really hurt them in their secondary was Gonzalez going out. And, his season ended early. But, I mean, still, even besides that, I mean, the drama offensively, Mac Jones showing that lack of maturity to step up and lead, but become a veteran quarterback. He's been disappointed. And so that's why I said no.
Now, I guess I'll ask you this. As we look now, a couple unsuccessful seasons after the Tom Brady era, do you believe it was Bill Belichick? Do you believe it, or do you think it was more Tom Brady? Or do you think it was just an even combination of the two for those successful years that we all grew up to know? Patriots, that they were that dominant. Do you think it was Bill Belichick, or do you think it was more so Tom Brady?
I mean, well, I definitely say it was kind of both. I mean, because, even when you look at those teams, that New England had, I mean, they had some legendary defenses. I mean, they were completely shutting teams out, neutralizing teams. Despite Brady being the greatest, he also has some of the greatest defenses on top of that.
Absolutely.
And people kind of forget that, the year after Brady left, I mean, the Patriots were looking like contenders, at a point in that season. And Mac Jones looked promising. And Mac Jones hit a decline, which is, not really Bill Belichick's fault. It gets to a point where that guy has to step up and has to develop.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and I think a lot of people disrespect Bill Belichick a lot more than he deserves. In my opinion, greatest coach of all time. And Tom Brady's not a 7-time Super Bowl champion without all those years with Bill Belichick is the point I'm getting at. But in the NFC East side of things, no, I'm not buying Zoom Plus. We'll finish up here with the East before we reset. But the Eagles, no shocker here. They're contenders. They just beat the Chiefs. We'll talk about them a little later. Of course, they're very high in my top 10 rankings. But the Cowboys here, I think, are interesting to talk about. This is a team that's 7-3. Dak Prescott is playing the best football of his career, in my opinion. And CeeDee Lamb is doing the same. And that duo has been carrying this offense for the last month or so. But why do you have them as pretenders? As, again, there's a lot of different views about the Cowboys and their future this season.
I mean, shoot, man, the Cowboys, man, they're pretenders because they're a complete roller coaster ride. I mean, their 3 losses this year have been bad losses. Their first 2 weeks, they look completely dominant. And everybody's minding like, okay, this might actually be the year. Then go out and get completely shut down by the Cardinals, a terrible loss. The week after that, they end up beating the Patriots by like 40. Then the week after that, they end up losing by 30 to the 49ers. And so that's why I'm saying pretenders. You never know what you're going to get from them. Dak has been looking great the past 2 weeks, but they've also, have been playing questionable, overall. And so that's why I trust pretenders.
Yeah, to me, I had them at 12-5 coming into the season, and I think that'll probably be their record when it all is said and done. But to me, they're pretenders because they're the Cowboys. They're a team that is going to win 12 to 13, or I guess 10 to 13 games each and every season. They're going to show promise. They might beat the Eagles once or twice a season, and they're going to go into the playoffs with some hype and some real. People are going to really think that they can win it all. It can be their year, but they're the Cowboys. They always fall short. And to me, it's just that same point in that cycle right now where, they look great, but they can't win that big game. And I did see a video the other day. I don't know if you've seen that video as well, but someone went through, and to this point in the season, the Cowboys do not have a single win on their schedule. If you look at all the teams that they've beaten, none of those teams have a winning record to this point in the season. So, I don't want to say they're frauds, but they're just the Cowboys, and that's the best way to explain them. But the Commanders here, To me, I don't remember. I believe I said it was a successful season for them. And I know they traded Chase Young, they traded away Montez Sweat. How was it a successful season? Well, I mean, if those two guys didn't want to be there, of course, you got to get rid of your dead weight. So they're very talented players, but if they don't want to be there, you got to get rid of them. So they got rid of them, got some draft capital, did what you needed to do with that situation, washed your hands. Okay, whatever. But the biggest thing for me this year is that they answered their quarterback, I guess, questions, at least as of right now. I think I'll say this. Sam Howell has the potential to be that next Kirk Cousins level quarterback where he's, above average, but he's not an elite quarterback to take your team over the top. But I still think Sam Howell has had a very promising rookie season, even though it's technically not his rookie year. This is his true rookie campaign. Brian Robinson has played amazing football after, of course, the gunshot incident last season. Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, they've all taken steps up. I just think overall, offensively, defensively, a large part of it due to Eric Bieniemy. They've just shown a lot of promise in their young stars. And again, I didn't have this team winning more than 6 or 7 games this year, so they're right where I think where I had them, and they're living up to my expectations prior to the season, plus some with the surprising output from Sam Howell. So to me, successful season to this point, given my expectations for the team. But you had no, and why is that?
Well, I had no because, last year at the end of the year, and coming into this season, we thought Washington was going to be like a top 10 defense. Last year, they win 8 games. They show some promise, and then they come into this year with the worst defense in the league by far. And
the Chargers.
Up there.
Chargers don't count as a team. We don't even count the Chargers.
Exactly. I don't know what the Chargers are, but and then Sam Howell, for example, too. I mean, Sam Howell has shown promise, but for him too, he can't stop turning the ball over. You fail to somewhat protect him. I mean, he's the most sacked quarterback in the league, and we don't even know if he's going to last the rest of the season. How badly he's been getting hit and beat up. So that's why I said no for Washington.
Absolutely, they definitely need to get more protection around Sam Howell. And I'm not even the biggest Sam Howell believer, but I think he's shown a lot of promise this season. And then for the Giants, there's no shocker here. They were a 10-win team last year. Everybody was saying that New York football is back, and they go to the playoffs and they win a playoff game against a 13-win team. And then they put up a fight in the second round of the playoffs against the 49ers. Now, of course, that game eventually got out of hand. Oh, I don't know if it was the Niners or the Eagles, but they put up a fight in that game. And, you come into this season, year 2 under Brian Daboll. You just paid Daniel Jones $40 million. You figured out the Saquon Barkley situation temporarily, but it just didn't amount to any wins. Tommy DeVito right now looks better, in these last couple of weeks than Daniel Jones has pushing the ball down the field in his entire Giants career. All right, little halftime break there. Of course, we're all ready for Thanksgiving at this point in the morning. But let's get back to it. We have 2 divisions left, and then we're going to get into our top 10 and, of course, our Week 12 predictions. Closing off here with the AFC West, we have the Kansas City Chiefs. We have them as contenders, despite losing to the Philadelphia Eagles. I guess I'll get your thoughts on the Chiefs and their season in a moment. We have the Raiders as a successful season. Of course, I think we can both agree that it is due to the change from coaching from Josh McDaniels to Antonio Pierce. Whether if they win more games or not throughout the rest of the season, I think Antonio Pierce is their guy going forward. And that's what the Raiders franchise has been missing for a long time, is stability at the coaching position. So I think we can both agree it is because of that head coaching change. And then for the Chargers, I can speak for you here and correct me if I'm wrong, but they just haven't figured it out on the defensive side of the ball. And they are continuing to waste the prime and talent that they have on this team on both sides of the ball. And they just cannot figure it out how to stop anybody. It looks like a high school defense playing against pros out there. They're like dead last in everything. And they're just really wasting Josh Allen's time in the league. They just they need a head coach. Or what did I say, Josh Allen? Justin Herbert. You guys know what I meant here. Basically, they need to get rid of Brandon Staley is the point I'm getting at. But then for the Chiefs, I'll let you dive into them here. I guess why are they contenders? And I get your thoughts on their recent loss.
I mean, it's a no-brainer. They're the second best team in football. The recent loss,
I like that second best team in football.
Yeah, the second best team in football. Their recent loss, has been because of the receiving core, which is obvious. The receiving core has been the reason why they lost week one. The reason why they lost against the Broncos. They're leading the league in drops, and they're this. It's honestly disappointing to watch them kind of lose these games for them. It's no reason why the Chiefs team shouldn't be 10-0 in a perfect world.
Absolutely. But I mean, again, I was talking to you before the show, and we were talking about the MVS drop. Of course, that happened. And if he caught the ball, we're saying the Chiefs are the best team in football right now. And that's small of a play, could have, it would change the conversations, is what I'm getting at here. But MVS is making like $8 million a season. The next highest receiver on the Chiefs is not even making $1 million a season. He's making more than 8 times the amount of any other receiver on this Chiefs roster, and he dropped that pass. Is the point I'm getting at? He leads this team in drops, and it's just I don't want to say embarrassing because that just seems disrespectful, but he definitely needs to be playing way better and playing for his price tag at this point. But then a very fun team, and a team that has an alter ego in Mr. Unlimited. Russell Wilson. This team has won 4 straight games out of nowhere. Cortland Sutton is like up there with Tyreek Hill for receiving touchdowns this season. Again, Russell Wilson looks like a borderline MVP candidate over these last month or so. And Sean Payton, they look like they've figured something out on both sides of the ball. I guess your thoughts here on the Broncos in these last month or so.
Well, they're pretenders, and if I was to say if this is a successful season or not, I say successful so far. They finally figured it out. Russ is finally getting in his groove, getting in his rhythm. The biggest concern, the reason why they're pretenders is because, I mean, statistically, they're the worst defense in the league.
Right.
Up with the Chargers statistically. And that's the biggest concern, despite them winning these past 4 games. And I think that's gonna come back to bite them. It's no way you're gonna win at all, in any perfect scenario without a defense that's somewhat competent and that can get stops.
Yeah, I mean, they struggled early in the season, and I really wonder where their defense ranks over the last month, because of course 70 points dropped by the Miami Dolphins, and 600 plus yards of offense. That definitely doesn't help. So I wonder where their defense ranks over this win streak is a good way to put it. But like you mentioned there, and I'll thank you for pointing that out. Doesn't mean that they're pretenders. Doesn't mean that they haven't had a successful season. Like the Cowboys, they're 7-3. They've had a successful season, but again, when it comes to contention, they're just not there yet. And with the Broncos, same thing there. But wouldn't that be crazy? Wouldn't that be crazy if Sean Payton and Russell Wilson figured it out? But for the NFC West, the last division here, the Niners, Contenders, I don't think there's too much to analyze there. They got Chase Young. They got even better. And after the bye week, they look back to their early season start of the 49ers that we know. The Seahawks, on the other hand, they have Geno Smith, and they've had a lot of promise from JSN over the last month or so. Devon Witherspoon, we both had as our defensive rookie of the year. Obviously, they've had some young potential pieces as well as their veterans. But, I'll let you go into depth. Why do you think the Seahawks are not there yet, despite, having somewhat a complete roster? Why are they not contenders?
Well, I mean, the biggest problem why is because, their playmakers haven't been making plays. And, DK and Lockett, they haven't had many opportunities to really open up this pass game, open up this offense. And, part of it is Geno Smith turning the ball over a lot. He's hit a huge step back from last season. And, coming into the season, I actually predicted it. I'm like, man, the Seahawks fans are finally going to realize, Geno Smith is back to Geno Smith.
Right.
No disrespect, but it's hard to replicate a season after that, after you just spent, almost a decade kind of struggling and finding your groove in the league.
Right.
And for you to come into the season and think you're just going to turn it around and end up winning all these games again, it's just unrealistic. And so that's how I said the pretenders.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to, you pretty much touched on all the bases there. As far as the LA Rams, we both said it was not a successful season, and I don't think either of us had big expectations for them with how much they've lost over the last year and a half or so. However, just with all the injuries and given their record, I mean, they've shown flashes here and there with a big win or two, but ultimately they just, that it hasn't been really a successful season because they're kind of just stuck in purgatory. But for the Cardinals, we split here, and to me, I said it was a successful season. And I know, how can it be a successful season? They're 2-9, and I guess that'll be your argument there. However, in my opinion, it's the simple fact that It's a successful season, I guess, in a reverse way, as they came to the season with not much at all on both sides of the ball, and they needed to pick a direction. And I think the direction was clear that they've wanted to tank, of course, starting Josh Dobbs for the majority of their games, and they've done that. So to me, given the fact that they are where we want them to be, and where I'm sure the front office wants them to be, in a position to get a guy like Caleb Williams, I'd say it's a successful season to this point. Because, of course, they also have questions in this offseason with a guy like Kyler Murray. But why do you say, of course, they have not had a successful season?
Yeah, well, I mean, they haven't been winning games, and I kind of like what you said. It's successful kind of in a reverse way. Because I guess you can't always, measure it based off of winning, like I've been doing, but kind of like look at it as like, all right, this is their objective coming into this year, and their objective and goal is to get Caleb Williams. And so I got a question for you. So if they were to end up not losing out and end up not being able to get Caleb Williams, is that a non-successful season for you?
Yes, it's definitely a not successful. Like, so if Kyler Murray comes back and let's say, what do they got? What do they? They've played 11 games so far. I think they still have their bye week left. So let's say they have 5 games left, 5 or 6 games left. If this team wins, if they split their next 6 games, if they're 5-11 or 5-12, whatever it is at the end of the year, that is not a successful season to me, because 5 wins is good enough to get a Michael Penix. It's good enough to maybe if Drake May falls down the draft boards, it's good enough to get him. But there's definitely a big difference in generational prospect, or I guess in prospects when we look at it. Of course, prospect tape and measurables and all that doesn't always mean automatic franchise changers. But I think it's definitely, there's a big difference between getting Caleb Williams and Drake May and the rest of the class that comes out at the quarterback field. Obviously, John Gannon just took over, and he is going to do what's best for him in his career, as selfish as that might sound, but that's just what happens. GMs and coaches, when they come in, they want to go out their way. If they're going to get fired, they want to bank on their guys that they trusted. And I don't know if that's Kyler Murray for them. So I think right now, I think they're happy that Kyler Murray's playing well, because it'll make it easier for them to move him in the offseason. And all of us fans are happy for Kyler, but to answer your question directly, if they win 2 or 3 games to end the year, I don't think it's a successful season, for the simple fact that they want to get Caleb Williams at that point.
Got you.
But moving over here to the top 10, this was the top 10 from last Thursday's video. Left side of your screen, you see our 1 through 5. Right side 6 through 10, of course. Is there any teams that you see dropping out of this list? Again, there's one glaring team due to the injury of their quarterback. But aside from the Bengals, do you think there's any team that drops out of this list, in your opinion?
Honestly, I don't think so. Obviously the Bengals, but
yeah,
definitely.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I said the Texans definitely get moved up in this top 10, and we need to move the Lions down because they are not better than the Ravens, and that's about it.
You're going to be a little upset here. The Bengals fall out, and right outside, we're going to talk about Mr. Unlimited, the Denver Broncos. Of course, we talked about them a little bit. And then the Seattle Seahawks, for the simple fact they're 6-4. They're competing for their division, and they're one of the best teams in the NFC. So, again, wanted to show them their flowers. There's not a lot of teams outside of like 11, as a good way to put it. I guess I could have maybe had the Buffalo Bills. Maybe I could have did that, but I'm not a Buffalo Bills believer. At number 10, though, we do have the Houston Texans. After weeks and weeks of hovering outside of my top 10, they finally crack it. Of course, C.J. Stroud is the best rookie we've seen since Andrew Luck. And overall, this team has just been America's team, is a good way to put it. They're fun, and everybody wants them to win. And Tank Dell and C.J. Stroud, it's just not often you have the combination of a young coach and young stars, and they put it all together in the first couple of years and win at a high level. It just doesn't happen often. So I want to give some shout out and some love here to the Houston Texans. But right now they're at number 10, because at number 9, we have a team that they dominated early in the season in the Jacksonville Jaguars. But the Jaguars just have a little bit better of a season. I guess, you can argue based off of who's had a better season so far. But to me, Jaguars, as of right now, I would trust in a one-on-one game. And I guess we'll get our answer this weekend between the two of these teams. But for right now, especially with how sharp the Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley looked last week, It's hard to go against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So you can flip 9 and 10, but for me, I'm going to roll with the Jaguars as of right now. At number 8, we're going to have the Cleveland Browns. This is matching their highest that they've been on this list all season, and we just keep winning. This team embodies the city of Cleveland, where it's not always pretty, but we're going to fight until the very end, and we're going to win. I guess we'll say we'll fight until the very last second, and we're scratching and clawing our way to the top. I mean, we're 7-3. I don't remember the last time we've had a team this talented, and I don't know if we've ever had a defense as good as the one we have now. So shout out to the whole crew, and I guess a lot of credit goes there to Kevin Stefanski. Another team that rises a spot is the Dallas Cowboys. Again, they haven't had an impressive track record as far as teams they've beaten, but they did take care of business last week. And again, they moved up a spot. They took care of their business, even though it wasn't against a notable opponent. And at number 6, we have the Miami Dolphins. Shout out to Jalen Ramsey and Amir Stewart. They had 2 interceptions last week in their game, and their offense just continues to look good. Hopefully, Devon Achane, that injury is not as bad as it seems to be. But 6 through 10 here, who do would you change anything in the 6 through 10?
Now, this is a great 6 through 10. This is perfect. Exactly what I expected, and the same exact power rankings I had. What I'm nervous about is his next 5.
His next 5, of course, I think I spoiled it there. We do have the Baltimore Ravens. I'm more of a Detroit Lions believer than a Baltimore Ravens believer, especially after the injury to Mark Andrews, because then you're relying on an injury-prone Odell Beckham, a rookie wide receiver in Zay Flowers. As much as I like Zay Flowers, he's a rookie wide receiver, so you're relying on Rashad Bateman, which nobody wants to rely on him. You're relying on Isaiah Likely, which he hasn't done much since his rookie year, and an injury-prone Odell Beckham. So it's going to quickly turn into an offense where it is Lamar, save us. And we've seen that play out over the last 4 or 5 years, and it just never turns out pretty for the Baltimore Ravens. I'm just hoping it doesn't turn into an injury for Lamar Jackson. At number 4, I have the Detroit Lions, a team that was blown out by the Baltimore Ravens, and I'll admit that. But again,
blown off the field.
The Lions, I'm sorry?
They were blown off the field.
Well, the Lions still have a top 10 offense and defense, one of the few teams to do that. In my opinion, I just think if they played today, or I guess I'll say this, if the playoffs started today, I have more confidence that the Lions will make it farther than the Baltimore Ravens. And that is saying a lot, because the AFC is a lot more wide open than the NFC side of things. So I think the Lions, I just have more confidence in them in a one-game scenario. And again, it could just be my love for Amon-Ra St. Brown. At number 3, we have the San Francisco 49ers, and this might be a hot take. You might want to move them up to the top 2, but in my opinion, I just, you can't just win 2 games in a row and, you're back into the top 2 where they were for so many weeks. To me, I think that the top 2 are very clear, and they are actually the same as I had last week. We have the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. Going into last week, I had the Eagles winning that game, and of course, you didn't. I just want to throw that out there, but the Eagles, they didn't start the game pretty, and honestly, that game just really symbolized everything that me and you have been saying all season, is the Eagles have not been playing their best football, but when they do, nobody can beat them, and that's kind of what they did in that second half, where they just were clicking on all cylinders, and of course, they got some breaks there in between with, of course, MVS and some other guys dropping passes, but the Eagles did end up winning that game, and they remain on the top They remain on the top of the league in my power rankings. And the Chiefs, you lost to the number 1 team in football. I'm not going to knock you because you lost to the best team. But I guess final thoughts on this top 10 here, and I guess anything you would change outside of 4 and 5.
Honestly, first thing I'll change is 4 and 5, and that's about it.
I guess it's not we're going to be arguing about that all season. Hopefully they can meet in the playoffs or something. But the race for Caleb, something we've added to the show just a few weeks back. We just want to, just like we talked about with the Cardinals late in those contenders, pretender slides, where it's success in a reverse way, at least for some of these teams. But the Bears pick via the Panthers. So the Bears have the number 1 pick right now, technically, because the Panthers are 1-9 and they are that bad. And of course, that pick is via the Bryce Young, DJ Moore trade from last offseason. The Cardinals, they lost and they rise to the number 2 spot. If they start to lose some games, I think we might see Kyler get pulled from this lineup quicker than we expect. But I do think they can get some wins here to maybe finish max 4 wins on the season. The Patriots, they're terrible, 2-8. They've lost 3 straight, and I think Bailey Zapp is going to be the starter going forward. So interesting. I guess we'll have to see how that plays out, but they stay at number 3. The Bears, with their actual pick, they lost. They move up a spot, and the Giants, they won due to Saquon being a receiver and not a running back. And Tommy DeVito, I guess, is him. The Giants drop a spot in the race for Caleb. But I guess any teams that you think can enter this list, I'll ask you this every week. Do you think that these will be the same 5 teams when the season is said and done, or do you think there will be another team added to this list? And if that is the case, what team do you think that will be? I know there's a lot to unpack there, but I guess tackle the question
the one
as
team I
best
can
as you
see
can.
leaving this list is the Cardinals, and we talked about it last week, how we both predict that Kyler Murray is going to pretty much screw this team out of this draft pick, and this is really interesting because when you look at the Panthers and look at how bad they've been, and also look at the Patriots and look at how bad they've been. I mean, shoot, the rest of the Patriots schedule is tough. I mean, they got the Chargers, the Chiefs, Broncos, the Bills, and the Jets coming up. When the Panthers are out, then the Panthers have a relatively winnable schedule. I mean, they got the Titans, the Bucks, the Saints, the Falcons, and the Packers, and the Bucks again. In week 17 or week 18, and so it's kind of tough to pick because despite the Panthers having an easy schedule, they're also that bad to where they can lose out.
Right.
But the Patriots, I don't see the Patriots winning.
Another
More
game.
than
I don't think
right,
they will.
exactly. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see.
Could you imagine if Bill Belichick gets his hands on Caleb Williams? I
That would
think
be actually crazy.
I think the Patriots might actually be a decent team next year, and we might be talking about Juju making a resurgence of a season. But at least I guess that's the potential of a guy like Caleb Williams. But then the final thing we want to tackle here on today's show, no pun intended, is our Week 12 predictions. Last week I was 10-4. I could have been 11-3, but Amir, of course, you had to remind me this weekend that I did change my prediction in the Browns and Steelers game last minute. So a couple weeks in a row where I've changed my prediction very last minute, and it cost me in the end. But I'm actually not mad about that because the Browns did win. So I'm still 10-4, and I'm 114-50 on the season. Just about 70% correct rate. But Amir, what was your record from last week? Of course, we know how Monday night played out.
So my record from last week was 10-4. That Chiefs and Eagles game, honestly, I always had with the Browns winning the AFC. I was confident in them winning this past week, and I was kind of frustrated watching that game. Because as a sports fan, I'm looking at it and watching. I'm like, no matter how much I can't stand a player or a team, watching teammates just sell a game for somebody so bad was frustrating to watch. MVS sell that game for Mahomes and the rest of the team. The whole entire receiving corps drop all those passes. Kelsey fumbling, and some huge moments, and that ended up dropping me down to 10-4 instead of 11-3. And my overall record for this season is at 66%, and I'm at 108-56.
Yeah, I just thought about it, and this is kind of off topic, but for next week's video and for all the prediction videos that we have coming up, expect Amir's record to be on the screen. I don't know how we've made it 5 or so weeks, and I haven't had his record on the screen. Going forward, I'll throw Amir's record on the screen so you guys can see it going forward. But let's get into Week 12. As on the left side of your screen, of course, we have the Thursday night games, the Thanksgiving games that will take place here in a couple hours. We have the Packers and the Lions. The Lions have looked really good on Thanksgiving under Jared Goff. You have the Washington Commanders and the Dallas Cowboys, and then San Fran goes to the 12th man to take on Seattle in the late night game. We're rolling with the favorites in those games with Detroit, Dallas, and San Fran. And then we have our first ever Friday game in, the first ever NFL game that takes place on a Friday in the Jets and the Dolphins. We are also going to take the Dolphins in that one. But then our first difference comes here in this Tampa Bay and Indianapolis game. I guess if you want to dive into that game, you can. But as far as the Giants game, the Pittsburgh game, and the Titans game, we agreed on those. But if you want to dive into this Tampa Bay game, why did you choose them over the Indianapolis Colts?
This is an interesting game. I think for Tampa Bay, despite them being the underdogs here, and the Colts being favored by 2.5, I think the Bucks, this is a pretty good matchup for them. And they've played some tough teams, the past 5 weeks, and they made it tough on them. And so, I think for them, they're kind of relieved going into this game, like, hey,
Yes.
like, this team isn't gonna be as tough as playing the Niners, the Texans, or the Bills. And so I think they're going in this game feeling kind of confident that, we can hang with the big dogs. And so this should kind of be a cakewalk.
Yeah, I mean the Bucks, like you mentioned, they've lost 5 of their last 6. Tough stretch for the Tampa Bay Bucks after they started so promising. And honestly, I like Baker. Honestly, people ask me this all the time. If I still want Baker on the team instead of Deshaun Watson. Of course, we're Browns fans. To me, I would rather win a Super Bowl with Baker Mayfield than
Yeah,
Deshaun Watson, if that makes any
definitely.
sense. Just because winning with Baker Mayfield was fun, and not that this has anything to do with this Colts game. It's just I like watching Baker Mayfield. I guess just not for the Browns, but in a way, I'd rather win at the highest stage with Baker over Deshaun Watson. Again, completely irrelevant to the conversation, but I guess I'll ask you that. I mean, did you enjoy Baker's time here in Cleveland? This is kind of
I
off topic here, but go ahead.
Man, I love watching Baker. Baker brought the excitement, that swag to our team that we
Yes,
needed. And I think Baker now, a healthy Baker will be perfect for this team. It'll be better than any defense he's ever had, better than any receiving core he's ever had.
yep.
Even if he's playing like a slightly above average quarterback, we'd still be doing even more damage than we're doing now.
Absolutely. And I mean, Baker getting the Baker, like right now, he's protecting the ball a lot more than he has in the past. And again, he's just we can never thank him enough, I guess, for changing the culture of a team that was 1-31 over 2 year stretch before he came into the franchise. So shout out to Baker Mayfield. And again, I wanted to go with him here, but I did go with the home team and the favorite in the Indianapolis Colts for the simple fact that this is a team that's is starting to get a little bit hot. And in my opinion, Gardner Minshew is going to be able to do just enough with this offense, whether if it's Michael Pittman. Of course, we had a little injury to Jamel Dean last week. So whether if it's Michael Pittman or Josh Downs fully healthy again, or even the running backs, I think Indianapolis is going to have their way on offense in this game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home. But moving over to the other games, we have another divisional matchup in Jacksonville and Houston, which is a very interesting game, and we'll talk about in a moment. The Saints in Atlanta, you see it there. We took the Saints, we took the Rams over the Cardinals. And I guess let's go back to the Jacksonville game here. Why did you have Jacksonville over the Cardinals or over Houston? As you haven't been the biggest Jacksonville fan all year.
Yeah, so I haven't been big on Jacksonville, but Houston is a weird team, because I'm still trying to kind of figure them out. They've looked pretty solid defensively, recently. And D'Amico Ryans is really doing a great job of pulling this young unit, up, and it's tough choosing this game because, Jacksonville, a team that's 7-3, they haven't had a huge win and also got blown out earlier this year. I just don't see them getting blown out like before. To start the year off, Jacksonville started off kind of slow, but just like you said earlier, Lawrence and really are starting to finally connect, and they're starting to finally look like they're starting to catch a bit of a stride here. So I chose Jacksonville on the
Yeah, I
road.
chose Jacksonville for the fact that they need this win more than the Houston Texans. And I get it. A win's a win, and both teams are trying to win in the division to make the playoffs. But just being the veteran team that Jacksonville is, they need this win more. And I think they might just come into this game with a little bit more edge than the Houston Texans, and that could be all that's needed. But in the 4 o'clock slate of games, again, we have the Rams over the Cardinals, and then we split here with the Browns game and the Bills game. But then we have the Chiefs over the Antonio Pierce led Vegas Raiders team. Sunday Night Football, we have the Ravens taking down the Chargers, and then we have the Vikings beating the Bears there on Monday night. But the two 4 o'clock games I want to dive into here are the Bills and the Broncos game. Of course, the Browns and their number one defense, they're going to Denver, going to Mile High, the toughest place to play football in the NFL. And they're taking on a team that's won 4 straight games. But why do you have the Denver Broncos here over the Cleveland Browns?
So for my write up here, this is going to surprise everybody. Instead of picking them from my upside, I chose them to actually win this game. And for the Broncos, I'm not the Broncos, but for Buffalo, they're desperate. They need this win. Right now, Josh Allen and his team, their backs are against the wall. That's when I think Buffalo plays best. They always play down to the competition, but they also play up to the competition. And I think right now is a get right game, for them to finally come out do some damage and make some noise and make it tough on Philly.
Absolutely. Oh, you dived into the Buffalo game. Yeah, I mean, like, I can't talk right now, but stick with me. Philly, to me, best team in football, and I think this is a game for them to just continue. This is a game that we can finally see them click on all cylinders. And I was going to go with Buffalo in this one, but then I realized if Philly doesn't make many mistakes at all, and again, they didn't look pretty at all last week in the first quarter or first half or so of football, but they figured it out and they beat maybe the best team in football in the Kansas City Chiefs. So I went with Philly there. I can't really see myself going against Philly, maybe until the Super Bowl comes around. But then I went with the Browns here in that matchup as, to me, the reason why Denver's lost the games that they have this season was because they couldn't protect Russell Wilson, and they couldn't let this offense get going. And this Browns pass rush is just elite. So if we can get to Russell Wilson, and unlike many teams in the league, we have good cornerbacks. We have a really good secondary. So if we can, if we can limit their elite wide receivers and just make it tough on Russell Wilson, I just think we're able to do enough offensively to edge out this game. And I've just doubted this Browns team too many times this year. So I think I'm going to finally roll with them. Hopefully I'm not bad luck. But I guess any other thoughts on any of these games here on the screen?
You know, this Browns and Broncos game, just like you just said, us both have doubted this Browns team too much. And even when I was looking at the contenders and pretenders, I'll put them as pretenders, but like, this is the one team in a long time where I've looked at them and I'm like, yo, this defense could really make this team contenders. This defense is actually legit.
It just sucks. Watson went down.
Exactly. Now Watson's down, so it's kind of tough. And I think for Cleveland to win this game, they're obviously going to be able to run the ball. The Broncos are the worst, run defense in the league, and I think they're the top 10 worst pass defense in the league as well. And so I think for this game, this will allow DTR to kind of get confident, kind of relax a little bit. He's not playing an elite defense like he has in his two starts, and it'll be confident for him. And, for me, Denver is hitting the stride like I've been saying earlier. Denzel Ward might be out this week. He had a labrum injury this past Sunday, and so for Russ and for this team, seeing that also brings more confidence for the pass game to open up.
Absolutely. But moving over here, that is going to do it here for today's show. As again, contenders, pretenders, Thanksgiving episode for you guys 2 years in a row. As of course, last year, I don't think I released one exactly on Thanksgiving. Regardless, that doesn't really matter. Again, I want to thank you guys for all the support, especially if you've made it to this point on Thanksgiving Day. Again, thank you for all the support on the road to 5,000 subs and the pace that we're at. I mean, we should have hit it by Sunday this week. So that's always exciting. And again, we couldn't get there without you guys. Now, but Amir, I want to thank you again for always coming out to these Thursday episodes. Any last thoughts before we get out of here and before we go get some food?
No, man, I'm excited to start watching some football tomorrow, man. It's gonna be the same routine like every Thanksgiving. Wake up, eat, take a nap, and watch some football. And so I'm excited, man.
Yeah, I mean, not much more to it's a very simple day, but it's a very effective day. Maybe not always in the best way, but regardless, we have some fantasy football videos coming out in an hour or so, so check that out. And then without further ado, good luck to your fantasy teams this weekend. Good luck to your real life teams this weekend. And I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy, go get some food.